All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the sections. As you can see from the talk title here, today we'll be exploring a case study related to the recent Ivanti zero-day exploitations and some key takeaways from the investigation of that. My name is Billy, and I'm an incident response consultant with Mandiant / Google Cloud, and I'm based in Japan. And today with me, I have Shawn here, who is also a incident response consultant with Mandiant. We both have the opportunities to work on a couple of high-profile and large-scale incident response engagements, combating against advanced threat and helping organizations to recover from sophisticated cyber attacks. Here's the agenda for the day. We'll first start things off with a quick look on the current threat landscapes. Then we'll dive into the zero-day exploits related to Ivanti. And we'll share a case study related to the investigation of that, providing insight into the exploit itself, the mass exploitation campaigns, and also insight into the attacker's tactics and methodology. Then I'll pass it over to Shawn to continue to talk about some possible post-exploitation scenarios upon successful exploitation of the zero-day vulnerabilities, and wrap up with key takeaways and actionable steps that you can reference to harden your defense and to set a more proactive defense strategy for your organizations. All right, to start things off, let's take on some statistics about the current threat landscapes. All the data here are from N-Trend 2024. It is an annual report produced by Mandiant to provide insight into the evolving cyber threat landscapes. Here on the right, you can see a QR code to the download page of the full report. If you're interested in it, you can scan the QR code or take a picture of it. I guarantee you that's not a phishing link in a QR code format to get us more work. Yeah, all the data here are are based on the investigation that Mandiant performed over the past year. And in 2023, there is a significant increase in the use of zero-day exploits, with 97 unique zero-day exploits being observed in the wild. These vulnerabilities, previously unknown to the security committee and also Defender, present a significant risk to organizations because there are no readily available patches or defenses. On top of that, exploitation are also observed to be one of the most common ways for attackers to get initial access to environment. About 38% of the initial attack vector are attributed to exploitations. And more worryingly, there was an increase and shift in focus towards edge devices and platforms, such as firewall, VPN appliance, that traditionally lacks the same level of security as core infrastructure. Threat groups and espionage groups are recognizing the values of these devices and platforms as the entry point into the corporate network. Espionage groups are also adapted in creating malware of tailored capability and with smaller footprint to allow them to remain undetected in the environment for extended period of time in order to achieve their long-term operation objectives. These shifts here present a significant challenge as it expands the attack surface of organizations and creates blind spots for the defenders. It also highlights the sophistications and evolving tactics of the threat actor, demanding organizations to adopt a more proactive defense strategy to combat against them. A perfect example that fills the two cybersecurity hot topics that I just talked about would definitely be the recent Ivanti zero-day exploits. Just a brief background related to the vulnerabilities that got disclosed. In January 2024, Ivanti disclosed two critical vulnerabilities impacting all their supported version of Connect Secure VPN appliance and also Policy Secure appliance. The first vulnerability that got disclosed is related to authentication bypass, meaning that one can easily bypass the normal authentication process to get access to restricted resources without needing a valid credentials. And the second CVE that got disclosed is related to command injections. It essentially allows one to send specially crafted requests to appliance with administrative privilege to get any sort of arbitrary command executed on the appliance. With these two vulnerabilities chained together, a threat actor could easily achieve unauthenticated remote code executions. These vulnerabilities pose a significant risk to the organization using the product, as the threat actor would be able to gain full control of vulnerable appliance. Just a quick timeline related to the vulnerability disclosure and also the associated exploitation campaign. We observed early exploitations in December 2023, prior to the disclosure of the vulnerabilities. And also we saw a surge in mass exploitation attempts following the disclosure in January 2024, as the details related to these vulnerabilities become known. While there were several CVEs and vulnerabilities that was disclosed subsequently as the situation was developing, the talk here will focus on the two that I just mentioned about, and also the subsequent malware deployment that we observed in the case. All right, let's shift gears now and take a look at the case study of the investigation of the zero-day exploitation campaign. Actually, before that, as with all our case studies, the data and information has been anonymized to protect the confidentiality of our client. However, the core details and insight remain relevant to understanding the threat and also the methodology used by the attacker. The case involved the compromise of multiple physical ICS appliances through the exploitation of the two vulnerabilities that I just mentioned. We observed common payload used in the wider mass exploitation campaign. But on top of that, we also discovered 4 unique malware that was previously unseen. And they work together as a cohesive ecosystem to enable the threat actor to maintain remote access to the appliance for their long-term objectives. These are the events that we observed in our case. As you can see from the bottom right green boxes there, it's all started with the exploitation of the vulnerabilities. The deployment of common payload, such as web shell and standard backdoors, were then observed. The extraction of appliance configurations and caches were noted to have taken place as well. Then the threat actor proceeded with cleaning up of web shells and other traces, as well as falsification of the internal integrity check tool that was on the appliance. And ultimately, they deployed the tailored malware that I just mentioned, the 4 malware, which we're going to cover later on, into the environment. These are all the events that we observed in our case. But how do we link all these pieces together to reveal the true intention and purpose of the attacker? If we take a look at the broader picture, well, everything started with the exploitations of the vulnerabilities as part of the mass exploitation campaign. Well, the campaign itself is targeting pretty much any vulnerable appliance that's wide open on the internet, meaning that it's very likely to be automated. And as part of the automated process, the threat actor extracted the configurations and caches from the appliance. The configuration and cache contains information about the appliance and also about the environment, meaning that with this intelligence in hand, the threat actor can carry out victim profiling to find out what is the high-value target to them. Once a target of interest is identified, they would then proceed with cleaning up of payloads and falsifying the on-device security measures to mask their presence. And also, they would then deploy tailored payloads specific to the victim environment to ensure the fact that they would be able to maintain long-term access to the appliance in order for them to achieve their operation goal. As malware plays a major role in the case, let's take a deeper look into the malware found in our case. Well, the malware that we observe are mainly split into two groups. First group here, highlighted in yellow, is the mass exploitation payload. And the second group is highlighted in red, the tailored payload that is specific to the victim's environment. For mass exploitation payload, they are commonly observed in the wider mass exploitation campaigns for opportunistic attacks. They include Wi-Fi and FreeSync web shells, which are essentially Python-based web shell that exists as a Trojanized component within originally on-device legitimate code package. We also have zipline backdoor here, which essentially allow remote access from the threat actor. As with tailored payload, the Spawn family, not the spy family, but the Spawn family here, consists of 4 members, which basically work seamlessly together to enable remote access from the threat actor, and also to proactively evade detections. We're going to cover the individual details in a bit, but essentially, SpawnN is an installer for the Spawn malware, Spawn mode, and Spawn snails. And Spawn mode itself is a tunneler, while Spawn snail is a backdoor. They work together to enable remote access from the threat actor. Spawn sloth is a lock tampering and lock blocking utility that got deployed from Spawn snails. These 4 Spawn malware families here demonstrate a higher level of sophistication and customizations, indicating the involvement of well-resourced and skilled threat actor. Moving on next, we'll dive into the individual details of the Spawn malware in a bit. Let's first start with SpawnN. It is a persistence installer for Spawn family. What it essentially does is hijacking the package installing process on the device by exporting a malicious functions, masquerading as a legitimate one. Once it hijacks the package installing functions, it will deploy the Spawn malware, Spawn mode tunneler, and also Spawn snail backdoor, as well as a generic web shell to specific locations in order to achieve persistence. On top of that, it's also capable of modifying the library load order, the LD preload environment variable of the appliance, to ensure that the Spawn malware is being loaded whenever the appliance is being booted up. Next in the line, we have Spawn mode. Itself is a tunneler, and it's designed to create a covert communication channel between the attackers and the compromised appliance. Each achieves this by injecting himself into the web server process and manipulating of web traffic. When it's loaded on the appliance, it will intercept and inspect all inbound web traffic and look for a specific pattern within the traffic. As you can see from the value highlighted in red here, it will look for this value as certain offset, as offset with hex value 13 and 1B here. When these values are found within the web traffic, it will tunnel the whole traffic to the destination host as instructed by the threat actor. The instruction is also embedded within the web traffic itself. All the other benign, normal traffic will be passed unmodified to the original legitimate functions, meaning that the normal operations of the VPN appliance will not be affected. This essentially reduces the chance of inducing any sort of anomalies within the environment, and therefore reduce the chance of the deployment of the malware being detected. Up next, we have spawn snails, which is a local SSH backdoor that belongs to part of the remote access mechanism set up by the threat actor. It's capable of injecting itself into the MDM process, and it will then use the open source lib SSH library to set up an SSH server and bind to the local host port 8300. Because of the fact that the SSH server is being set up to bind to localhost, it means that it cannot be accessed directly from external environment. What the threat actor has to do is to leverage spawn mode tunneler that I've just mentioned to have external traffic to be tunneled and reach the hidden SSH backdoor set up locally. With such a remote access mechanism, the chance of the remote access traffic being dropped by the firewall is significantly reduced because it's just simply blend into the normal web traffic. And the defender would likely not see any suspicious or abnormal traffic that got roused to ports that's sent out. On top of this backdoor functions, it's also capable of deploying spawn sloth, which is a log blocking utility we are going to cover next. So for spawn sloth itself is a utility that prevents log from generating and also disable log forwarding to further obscure the activities from the attacker. It injects itself into the system logging process and then disable log forwarding, and at the same time prevent log entries from being generated and from being written to the disk. It also has a conditional activation function that it will only activate when the spawn snail backdoor is actively running. All these components work seamlessly together to create a very stealthy channel of remote access from the threat actor, while also proactively evading detections by preventing logs to be generated or to be forwarded to a centralized locations. The slide here is a visual representation of the full ecosystem and how each of the individual components within the spawn malware family works together. Sorry that it might be a little bit too small for you guys to look at the details, but essentially, starting from the bottom here, it's all started with the deployment of spawn end, which is a persistent installer, like I mentioned. It's capable of deploying spawn snail and spawn mode into the compromised appliance. The threat actor can then leverage spawn mode tunneler to access the local hidden SSH backdoor set up by spawn snail for remote accessing. In order to cover their traces, spawn sloth was then dropped from spawn snail to prevent logging functions on the device to work as intended. All these malicious components are strategically deployed onto the appliance to ensure the fact that the threat actor can evade detections and maintain their long-term access to the compromised appliance for subsequent malicious actions and for achieving their long-term operation goal. Up next, I will pass it on to Shawn here to talk about some of the possible post-exploitation scenario associated with the vulnerability exploitations.
Right. Testing. All right, thank you, Billy. So I think we have gone through a lot of technical details as to what the Spawn malware ecosystem was and what sort of capabilities it has. But in our line of incident response work, one of the most common and pertinent questions we get is often, what does this breach mean to me? What is the impact to my organization? And in order for us to understand the sort of impact this sort of edge device compromise has, let's take a step back again to recap the entire Ivanti breach as a whole. So this breach started out from a mass exploitation campaign, as you can see from the green and blue blocks on the screen, where the threat actor deployed commodity, not really commodity, but more widespread web shells, backdoors, and that eventually resulted in the threat actor gaining access to various configuration files and cache from a widespread number of devices. From there, they drilled down on a select few number of targets, and as you can see in the yellow and red boxes, they conducted some anti-forensic measures such as modifying internal scanning tools, removing their traces, and then finally deployed the Spawn malware ecosystem for long-term persistent access. So if long-term persistent access to an edge device on your network is the end goal here for the threat actor, what sort of ramifications does that have to an organization? Firstly, threat actors will be able to monitor all web traffic that flows through the device. If certain secrets, such as certificates, are found and stored locally on the device, they may be able to leverage that to intercept, decrypt, and potentially even modify that traffic. In addition, compromising that edge device kind of gives them a textbook into your network. They can read certain system files, look at maybe your firewall rules, configurations, routing tables, and that will give them a better understanding of the network and help them cherry pick subsequent targets to move to. Finally, and this goes without saying, with the edge device compromise, they can use the edge device as a springboard into and to move laterally to other devices within the network. So there are certain misconfigurations and not adhering to best practices that could help make the threat actor's job easier. And we will talk about some of these misconfigurations and best practices in the subsequent sections. So whether you are an individual forensic analyst or incident responder looking to improve the way you respond to sophisticated threat actors, or whether you are a CISO, head of your security program, looking to better manage, better adapt your organization's security posture against this new trend of exploit-driven intrusions, our experience responding to the Ivanti 0 days has given us some takeaways that we feel would be relevant to all of you, and we would love to share them with you in the subsequent sections. Firstly, for the individual investigator, one of our immediate takeaways and lessons learned from this breach was to preserve on-device artifacts. And to anyone who is familiar with forensic analysis, maybe this goes without saying, and preserving evidence is a timeless saying in the world of forensic analysts. But it is particularly important when it comes to edge devices for two main reasons. One, many of these edge devices run proprietary operating systems. This means that they typically do not work well with modern-day EDR solutions, and hence there is already a slight decrease in visibility and detection opportunities on this device. Secondly, given the position and function of this device on the network, these devices experience a lot of web traffic, a lot of activity, and that means that your logs are typically going to roll much faster. So your visibility period of on-device logs is much shorter, and hence, should an intrusion happen, that compromises your overall visibility. So our main takeaway, our first takeaway, was that the moment we discover an intrusion on an edge device, we have to prioritize preserving as much evidence on the device as possible. Of course, on-device logging has its limitations. It's not going to tell you everything. And a second thing that we found particularly helpful was to leverage side channel artifacts. So side channel artifacts can come in the form of other network logs like firewall logs, web proxy logs, and these really help contextualize the data that we see on the device or bridge certain visibility gaps. One key use case here would be, for example, attempting to detect a well-masqueraded beacon on this edge device. If it's hidden well, it's named with a very legitimate-looking file name, it's not listening or communicating on any suspicious ports. At first glance, looking based on file system artifacts, it might be challenging to identify. However, by leveraging side channel artifacts like firewall logs and looking for suspicious traffic, that could give you a time window to zoom into and help make detection of other artifacts even easier. So you've gotten as much data as you can from the device. You've gotten as much data you can from the surrounding network. How then, as an investigator, should we approach analysis of a edge device that is compromised? So as we talked about previously, many of these devices run proprietary operating systems. So these are slightly different from the Windows, the Mac, the Linux that many forensic analysts are typically more accustomed to. And hence that presents its own challenge when it comes to forensic analysis. And we can begin to tackle that challenge by establishing a new analysis baseline. One way to establish that baseline is to use golden images. So golden images are images of devices in their most default configuration state. In the event of a compromise of an edge device, enterprises can work with these device vendors to see if a golden image can be procured. And if you can get your hands on one, that opens up all sorts of investigative pathways. You can do stuff like file directory comparisons. You can do file hash comparisons. You can even compare the content of certain key system files to look for anything that is suspicious. But by having that baseline, it really goes a long way in filtering out the known good, which in a device that is so noisy, so much activity, really helps bring the suspicious behavior to the forefront and make it easier to detect. A second way that we tried to establish a baseline in our investigations was to leverage frequency analysis. And we did so in two different case studies. One was in the manifest file that defines the load order of certain libraries. You can see it in the bottom left hand of your screen. When we first looked at the file, there were 5 files there. Of course, we have redacted the file names for confidentiality, but at first glance, they all looked legitimate. This was our first time on the device. Nothing really stood out to us. It looks fine. But it was only after we started doing analysis on multiple devices that we realized that only 2 out of the 5 file names were constantly appearing across devices. And that kind of sounded some alarm bells on the remaining 3, which eventually turned out to be malware samples appended by the threat actor. Another use case for frequency analysis was in file carving. So file carving is the process of attempting to recover and look at deleted files in the residual space on the disk. Amongst those recovered files, you would typically expect temporal data that gets deleted frequently. This could mean session files, temporary files, logs that are rotated. But when we sorted all our carved files by file extension, we found a single .so shared object file. And that immediately raised some alarm bells and turned out to be one of our spawn malware samples. So beyond the individual investigator, I think enterprises also have a key part to play when it comes to detection and hardening against these sort of edge device compromises. We often say prevention is better than cure, And while I believe everyone who works in the industry knows that 100% prevention in cybersecurity is just typically not feasible, maintaining proper patch management goes a long way in deterring these sort of zero-day attacks against your edge device. And enterprises can begin to do so by first understanding the different assets within your environment. By maintaining a good inventory of these assets, understanding your attack surface. You can then push out patches based on asset criticality, whether is it likely to be an entry vector to your environment, or whether the vulnerability is particularly critical on a certain subset of your assets. In cases where you are unable to patch these systems, it is critical to ensure that compensating controls are put in place. This could mean network segmentation, stronger access control. Something has to be done to strengthen and harden these devices if they cannot be patched. At the end of the day, patching is an incredibly challenging process, especially if you are a large company with a huge electronic footprint. Maybe you have some on-prem, some in the cloud, across multiple regions in the world. Patching is hard, but it has to be done in order to give your enterprise the best security posture to protect yourself against zero-day compromise. We also talked a lot about how the individual investigator needs to harness as much data on the device and in the surrounding network. Enterprises have a role to play here as well. And it is the enterprise's job to ensure that there is sufficient visibility on the edge of the network. On the edge of the network, by increasing the amount of visibility we have, both on the device and also in the surrounding network artifacts, that could increase the chance of detection opportunities. And enterprises can begin to do so by creating and adhering to certain logging standards. This will help ensure that there is sufficient log visibility in the event of an incident. If logs can be forwarded to a centralized location for storage, or better yet, to a SIEM for data aggregation and analysis, that would be even better. And this really helps to reduce the visibility gap on the edge of the network and also help to prevent the impact of anti-forensic measures taken by threat actors, which we did see in the case of this Ivanti 0-day, where the threat actor not only modified internal scanning tools to avoid detection, but even deployed their own custom code malware to tamper with logging capabilities. Lastly, enterprises should also prepare for the worst case scenario, which is in the event the device is indeed compromised, we have to make it more difficult for the threat actor to have any impact despite the compromise. And enterprises can do so by aligning with industry best practices. In this case, the device we are mentioning is a VPN appliance, and hence certain controls can be put in place to limit the impact of a VPN device being compromised. Firstly, enterprises can use stronger authentication methods, make sure that you have your multi-factor authentication configured. We could restrict admin console access from external IPs. We could also restrict egress traffic to only certain whitelisted resources. This would help limit the functionality of many backdoors. And most importantly, or not most importantly, but additionally, when it comes to the VPN functionality itself, it is critical that we use strong encryption methods and also be wary of the threat of VPN session hijacking. And enterprises can begin to defend themselves from VPN session hijacking by enforcing VPN session timeouts or making sure that VPN session cookies are not able to be reused. So we've talked a lot about technical takeaways for the individual investigator and for the enterprise. Another key pillar in combating these zero-day intrusions on your edge devices lies in the strategic enhancements that guide your enterprise's overall security posture. Enterprises have to think assumed breach. The numbers from M-Trends 2024 are testament enough that exploit-based intrusions are on the rise. As Billy mentioned at the start of the talk, 97 0 days were exploited in the wild in just 2023 alone. And this is almost a 3-fold increase from just 5 years ago in 2019, where 33 0 days were observed. In addition, across all the cases that Mandiant responded to worldwide last year, 38% of these cases had exploits as the original entry vector. So it's critical that enterprises think not if, but when it comes to a cyber intrusion, and they can begin to do so by prioritizing not only defensive measures defensive measures, but also reactionary measures. And one such reactionary measure is to employ a layered defense strategy. This means understanding your attack surface, understanding the possible initial entry vectors to your organization, and ensuring that certain protectionary measures are put in place to make it harder for a threat actor in the event of a compromise. This could come in the form of network segmentation, intrusion detection systems, or increasing detection within your network and not just on the perimeter. It is also critical that enterprises prepare for such scenarios during peacetime and not wait for the event of an intrusion to scramble. Enterprises can look to develop their processes, their capabilities, and this could come in the form of playbooks for certain scenarios or certain types of incidents, training your security teams, etc. We often invest a lot in security controls, but not as much in validating these security controls. And with the ever-evolving threat landscape and the increase in exploit-driven intrusions, it is critical that enterprises regularly evaluate the efficacy of their controls to make sure that they are still serving their purpose. All in all, we would really like to just give a shout out to a few of these folks who have been indispensable in guiding us through this presentation, be it for their malware analysis work or general technical advisory. So, yeah, I think we have come to the end. This is a QR code to the blog. If anyone is more interested in the technical details behind the talk, feel free to check it out. If not, in the short 45 minutes that we have, this is our experience responding to the Ivanti 0 days on the front line and the 9 key takeaways we felt we wanted to share with you guys. Thank you.